Hey everyone, Michelle Seidling here with another episode of Military Transition Wellness, the podcast dedicated exclusively to those transitioning from military service. Today we are talking about life design and engineering. And who better to talk about that with than Iaroslav Rybakov, a life design engineer. Iaroslav, welcome to the podcast. This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be informed as new episodes become available. If you enjoyed today's episode or any of our episodes, please rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. As always, check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some resources as you begin your health journey.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Oh, wow. We are so excited to talk about this topic and the interconnection of life design and wellness. So many different topics here and areas of focus. But first, will you take a moment to introduce yourself and what brought you to this point in your life? Why life engineering?
Of course. So back in 2015, I was graduating from engineering and I had no clue what is it that I want to do with my life. I knew for sure that I didn't want to do engineering, but both my parents were engineers, so it was kind of the logical choice that I ended up regretting, if you want. And then I had my first engineering job offer for quite a substantial sum of money back in the day, especially for a 25-year-old graduate. But I refused that because I knew this is not where I wanted to be. And so I kind of asked myself the question, well, what kind of lessons do I want to learn? And the answer was I wanted to work with people more than machines, more than computers, more than anything else. And for me back then, the only logical answer was, well, management. But no one hires a 24-year-old manager. So I ended up enrolling in the Army, in the Canadian Armed Forces here in 2016. And they trained me, they paid me to become an engineering officer. So I was in charge of the mechanics and the weapons technicians in the Montreal area. And that has been a transformational experience. Because I mean, the leadership training, the camaraderie, like everything that the military brings you is absolutely invaluable. It was probably the most valuable experience of my life so far. But then I kind of got into personal development. I got into, well, okay, what's next? What kind of life do I want to build for myself? What kind of relationships do I want? What kind of person do I want to become going further? And by answering these questions, I kind of merged my personal development journey, my engineering background, my military experience into this like one focal point, which is now coaching and helping engineers and young professionals figure out what is it that they want to do with their lives and how to make this an intentional process. So not just looking at the first option available, but how can you make design choices and intentionally see where they can bring you in life. And it's a very, very relevant topic for people actually leaving military service because they're facing the same questions. They have sometimes the easy option in front of them, but that's not what they want. So how can they go about making these choices intentionally, knowing what they want, knowing their values, knowing their purpose in life, and then build the life they truly want?
I love that. I love just kind of repurposing yourself or really thinking about where you want to
Exactly.
be in life. Fantastic. Well, will you tell us a little bit more about what exactly is the life engineering part of it? What is that whole transition of designing your life essentially?
Um, it's a way of planning for your future. So anyone that has been in the military know that, well, first you have to have a plan for anything you're doing, but second, that no plan survives contact with the enemy. But a plan is absolutely essential. And when you think about, well, what am I doing next week? I'm going on vacation. Okay, how do I plan that? That's very easy. But when you ask yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? Some people have a good idea. A lot of people have no clue, and even less people know exactly how they're going to get there and have a plan for doing so. So life design and life engineering is about figuring out the destination. What's the outcome that you want? The question is like, where do you want to be? What environment do you want to live in? What kind of job do you want to do? What kind of impact do you want to have on other people? What kind of relationships do you want to build? What kind of person do you want to become? And then taking that outcome and saying, this is my intent. This is uh, the final outcome the main effort that I want to build. How do I get there in a step-by-step process?
Okay. So for you, what was that process? You mentioned, your parents were engineers, then the military had brought you some great skills. But as far as really, really kind of thinking of your life beyond the military, so to speak.
My life beyond the military was, and everything that I'm about to say is with hindsight. I had to discover everything like in a painful step-by-step process, but to end in a final vision where my job is to inspire people, not just so that they become inspiring and achieve their goals and achieve their dreams, but so that the people around them, around my clients, looking at themselves, can see these people become inspiring and be inspired in turn. So it's about creating this chain of inspiration where as my clients grow, as my clients become whoever they want to become and achieve their dreams, they can inspire others to do the same and build their own networks and build their own communities of people that do the same thing.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut you off there. So finish your thought.
I lost my thought, so let's just keep going.
Okay, so now with that, you're just kind of, what exactly is the process? How do you kind of, I guess, wrestle with life, so to speak, and discovering what you want to do after the military and finding your purpose?
It's a visualization exercise. A lot of people, we already kind of know what we want deep down inside of ourselves. So a lot of people know what's important to them. They know that family is important to them. They know that relationships are important to them. They know that work-life balance is important to them. They also know that a lot of things inspire them. So, for example, helping others inspire them. Working as a team to achieve bigger goals inspire them. Especially for people in the military, where teamwork has been ingrained into their very beings with 10 years of indoctrination. Life is about helping others succeed just as much as it is about succeeding yourself. Um, so, but when we talk about these things, we're all kind of overwhelmed by the by our daily needs and daily rituals. So we have to get to work. We have to plan the day for our kids. We have to do lunch. We have to do this. We have to do this. And if very, very quickly we lose focus, we lose that connection to what we truly want deep inside of ourselves, and it becomes a burden. People start saying, well, I can't afford to go travel for a year. I can't afford to quit my job. I can't afford to quit my business. It's just not a reasonable choice. So the first step into figuring out where you want to go is to reconnect with that part of yourself. Reconnect with who am I truly? What is it that I value? What is truly important to me? Not in this some kind of vague sense, well, family is important to me, but list of priorities. The first thing that I care about, what is it? What is the second thing that I care about? Is it freedom? Is it relationships? Is it work? For some people, work is extremely important, but is it more important than family or less important than family? And as you kind of explore who you are and what you want, you start building yourself a set of principles by which you're going to judge the options in front of you. So if one option is more family oriented, the other option is more career oriented, well, one is more important to you? Usually in these cases, when we're faced with such a choice, we're overwhelmed with peer pressure, we're overwhelmed with what we should be doing or what we think people should be doing, what everyone else does, but not what is it we want. So the very, very first step is figuring that out. Who are you? What are your values? What's important for you? And what's your purpose? When I say what's your purpose, it's not it's a very specific purpose statement. So what is, in one sentence, the thing that inspires you? for me personally, it's inspiring people. Inspiring people inspires me. And because I know that and I can formulate it in one sentence, I can now use that sentence to say, well, being a leader in the military is kind of a good way to do it. Being a teacher in high school is a kind of a good way to do it. Being an engineer and doing code all day, probably not.
Mhm. Okay. So how was it in terms of your own kind of discovery of that? You kind of went and prioritized things like that. How was that in terms of, did it come clearly for you? Did it take a while? What exactly was that process for you?
I worked with a coach. So first of all, it was very unclear and very long and very painful. But it takes about 2 hours, 3 hours to do an exercise with a competent coach to figure these things out. We all have these answers inside of ourselves. We already know what's important to us. We just have trouble verbalizing it. And so going through a short meditation exercise or self-questioning exercise will allow you to do that. And it's part of a small part of what I do with my clients. But it's something that you can figure out on your own if you have enough introspection and enough self-awareness. Just writing these things down instead of just having them in your head is a huge plus, because once they're written down, they're rationalized and have them in front of you, and you can say with objectivity, this is who I am.
Okay. So in terms of this is who I this is who I am, are you talking about in terms of your priorities or what job you
Yep.
want?
Yeah, exactly. So very specifically, who am I? My strengths, my best skills, my values, my purpose, um, my my personality. Part of the part of my engineering background, I used to make an Excel spreadsheet and decompose a person's personality for themselves. So say, here's a personality trait, here's its opposite. How do you rank on a score of 1 to 10? And then when you fill the whole table out, you can see very specifically: do you lean more towards discipline? Do you lean more towards intuition? Do you lean towards masculinity, femininity, strength, or character, and anything else? And then it gives you a profile of what what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and how can you misapply them.
Okay. Now, is it in terms of um, with your own experience, and then working with different clients as well? What is the biggest, I guess, hurdle per se with those transitioning from the military?
Depending on, so first of all, lack of marketable skills. So sometimes people that have been in combat arms a lot, they have trouble articulating how are the skills that I have useful in a commercial setting or in a business setting, so that I can convince a hiring manager to hire me for what I know how to do. That's the first thing. Second thing is, people have been in the military for so long that they kind of lose they kind of start losing their identity. There's a lot of pressure in the military to bring forward, like to bring the needs of the community ahead of your own. And as such, people start identifying with military values, and when they get out, they don't necessarily know, well, who was I before I got in there, and who am I now, and what is it that I want. And then a third, a lot of people leave the military to leave the military. So they retire from the military. They don't retire to a new civilian life. So for XYZ reason, and there's a lot of criticisms that can be leveraged, that given to the military. So I can understand them 100%. But then, okay, you leave that. What's your plan? It's like an actual retirement. What are you going to do with all your free time? What are you going to do with the next 30 years of your life? So you're leaving one thing, but what are you heading towards? And a lot of people don't have that vision built out.
Okay. And not having that vision, what exactly, from a wellness perspective, how does that affect them in terms of not having
It's
that vision?
you see that a lot in retirees and people that retire early, and also leave the military or switch careers in general. You see people leaving a toxic job or leaving the military or leaving their careers, and suddenly they don't know who they are anymore because they don't have all of their identity was tied to I'm a Marine or I'm a pilot or I'm an engineer or I'm an IT professional, and suddenly their job is gone, but so is their identity. And now they have to rebuild this whole thing from scratch. So again, who am I? What is it that I want? What's important to me? What are my personality traits? What are my skills? What are my strengths? Um, everyone gets lost in this process. In the beginning, that's completely normal. So people are quite like lose their bearings. They're not sure where they headed, and that's fine. Um, Sometimes, if people are unsure too long and they can't make a decision of where they want to be headed, sometimes it had like the consequences of this is anxiety, perhaps even depression. So a lot of mental health issues that start because people don't feel useful anymore. They feel like, okay, where am I going? What am I doing? I'm not doing anything. It kind of sucks. But with the right process, you can harness all of that and rebuild your identity, your vision, and your understanding of who you are and where you're going. It takes a couple months tops.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. I love that. Now, is you focus on engineers and those uh, doing that transition or finding their purpose. Is there anything that's unique about the engineering field that kind of either becomes problematic in terms of that transition, or can, on the flip side, can help in terms of transition?
Um, there are a lot of things that can do both. Engineering is from the outside, people look at a lot of engineers and say, wow, they're so good, they're so great, they can do anything. And when people say, well, I'm not happy at doing this, a lot of peer pressure comes down on them and say, what's wrong with you? You have such a good job, you have such a high salary, you have such high benefits, you have everything you ever wanted, and you're not happy. And so that's very, very hard for people to accept that, yeah, you can have everything material that you ever wanted materially and professionally, but still something's missing in your life because you don't have purpose. This is not exactly where you want it to be, etc. This is a very, very hard step for them. On the flip side, engineers are used to the design process. They know that they have requirements, they have a client intent, they have requirements, they have functionality, and they have things and like characteristics that the final product needs to have. And then they can break down the thing they're designing into parts, do their design work, and publish the blueprints and follow the production of it. That's like in a 30-second version of what an engineer does. But they can apply the exact same process to their lives. Like your purpose, what is it that you want out of life? Who are you? That's your requirements. Then go out, design the life you want, and go build it. It's a very, very straightforward process that engineers are very, very familiar with. And as a bonus, you can use numbers and spreadsheets and all these different tools to help you along the journey. Engineers are very, very comfortable already with those tools. So it's just a matter of overcoming this bias that engineering is the be all end all of professions, and accept that you want to do something else and then apply the exact same skills that you already have to figure out what you want and go out and do it.
Okay, fantastic. Will you give us some examples, besides your own story, of course, of those with whom you've worked, of how they made that transition, or whether it be a struggle or a
Yeah, for
different
sure.
positive things?
I've worked with one person very, very recently. He's not quite an engineer. He was just as lost, but he was a bioscientist turned marketing expert turned wherever he wanted to go. And his issue, he already knew kind of where he wanted to go. He knew he wanted to have a business. Um, but then, what kind of business? Where do I go with this? How do I make it happen? How do I build the things that I need out of life into that business? He had no clue. So he came to see me, and we worked together for about 6 months. And the value that he got out of this kind of work is organizing his thoughts, organizing his life, organizing the direction he was going. So he figured out that one of his strengths was physical training. So he started, along with his bioscience/marketing job, he started a personal trainer's course. He then decided that financial independence is very important for me, but he had no clue what that meant, or he didn't have any financial literacy. So one of his goals was to learn about stocks, investing, real estate, blah blah. Um, Another important part that he discovered is that he wanted to travel 3 months a year. Um, but how do you do that with a job, with a business, and so on? He didn't know, so he had to plan for that. What are the specific solutions that apply to me to be able to do this? And his solution was, he decided to cut his hours in half. So he went to his boss and said, "I'm not working 20 hours a week." His boss said, "Okay, cool. Same job, remote job. Now that allows him to travel." And the results of all these decisions were, first of all, figure out, well, what are my strengths? Where am I going? What is it that I want? What are some of the goals that I need to do to set for myself? And then, what's the best way to achieve those goals? And each person's situation is very unique and very different. There's no one solution that will fit everyone. So for some people want to travel, some people don't. Some people want to start businesses, some people don't. Some people have unique family situations, some people have unique work situations, and it's up to them to find the best way to make their goals easier and to make their dreams come true. My job is to make them realize that they have options, and you don't have to work 40 hours a week. There's option A through Z, and now you have to pick based on what you want, based on who you are, based on your strengths, what's best for you. So whether it's real estate investing, whether it's business, whether it's reduced hours at work, whether it's seasonal work, whether it's contract work, there's all these options, and it all depends on what you want and how you want to do it.
Okay. Now, from a life balance perspective and a wellness perspective, how has achieving your purpose, so to speak, in this case, you're doing coaching on and focusing on in the engineering field, how has that contributed to your overall balance, overall wellness, other aspects of health that you've seen?
It's a very different and interesting experience. For example, I used to work for a civilian company, and after 8 hours of not doing what I wanted and working in a difficult environment, let's put it that way, I was burnt out and exhausted, and 8 o'clock I was in bed. Okay. Now, because I'm doing not only what I'm passionate about, but what's aligned with inspires me, what's aligned with my skills, what's aligned with my values, what will allow me to achieve my personal goals, my financial goals, all of this in one package. Now you have to physically drag me off my computer for me to stop working. There's just so much energy, so much momentum, so much power in having all of these things aligned that you get almost superpowers. There's a very interesting phenomenon that only people in the military truly understand. I think is when you're tired, when you're wet, when you're in a trench, when you're cold, hungry, and everything else. You can do two things. You can focus on yourself and say, "For me, what am I doing here?" Blah 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 blah. Or you can focus on your buddy besides you and say, "How can I help him? And how can he help me?" And as soon as you flip that switch and say, "It's not about me, it's about everyone else," and it's about the team succeeding more than me, you get this boost of energy. You get a lot more resilience. You get a lot more personal power, and allows people to overcome their own limits. So it's kind of what I'm feeling right now, because yes, of course, I'm doing this for myself. It's my business. They're my dreams. I want to be a digital nomad, like all these things. But ultimately, it's about helping people. It's about helping either military or engineers or professionals or whoever else that doesn't know where they're going, what to do, figure out their lives and find that power so that they can do amazing things. And so that people around them can see those results and be inspired as well. So hopefully, maybe it's a bit idealistic, but like one person at a time this way, that's how I think we change the world. So just knowing that and seeing that in my head, I feel like it's empowering to the highest degree.
Fantastic. I love that. I love, and I can hear your passion too, that's the spark that is igniting you in career wise and health wise. That is fantastic. Now, with regard to those transitioning right now or thinking about it, what is the first step to really designing your life as you exit the military and beyond?
Two very easy steps. And ideally, you want to do them with a coach because it's a much more powerful experience, but you don't have to. You can do it, have a piece of paper and do it on your own. Take 24 hours, sit down, turn off your phones, go into the bathroom and close the door if you have to so you don't get distracted, and do two things. Who are you? What are your values? What are your strengths? What are your strengths? What's your purpose? What inspires you? And write that down. Scratch notes, draw, anything that speaks to you, but put it on paper. Stop thinking about it, put it on paper. So take 12 hours to do that. And it takes 12 hours because after 5 minutes, you're like, well, I don't know. And it takes the hours of just sitting there in nothingness for things to come up. That's the first step. Then take the next 12 hours, figure out what is it that I want. Again, where do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to become? What kind of strengths do you want to develop? What kind of skills are you missing? What kind of relationships do you want? Write these down. Write or draw, whatever works for you. Take 12 hours. Because after the first 5 minutes, you're going to say, I don't know. But it takes those hours of nothingness, of being stuck there with this problem for things to come out. So 24 hours, sit down and do this. You'll be thanking yourself that you took the time, because it'll solve a lot of the questions that you have.
Okay. So you're kind of organizing your life on paper, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And the paper part is extremely important because if it's in your head, as soon as you think of something, you say, yeah, that's a good idea. But as soon as you think of something else, you're forgetting that first idea. You have to put it down. It's the only way your emotional brain can give you the information and your rational brain can write it down. And then you can rationally understand everything that inspires you and that your emotional brain is telling you should be doing.
Okay, fantastic. I love that. And then executing that, is that where you get either a coach or just some
Exactly.
turn to a friend, perhaps? Or...
Exactly. One thing again, with a coach, it's a much more powerful experience. It saves you lots of time, months and years of work. But you can do it with a friend. You can do it with a partner, with a family member, with an accountability partner you just met online. It doesn't matter. But do it with someone. Create a community around that change. Again, this principle of teamwork, principle of community building, principle that you're stronger together and that you get superpowers when you think of others. Use that. You've learned that in the military. Use that. It'll come in handy more than once.
I love that. Fantastic. Well, as we wrap up here, what are some parting words, some words of wisdom and of inspiration as for those transitioning?
Yeah, one thing that I see my clients come up against very often is that if you sit down and do the exercise of who am I and what is it that I want, and you have it on paper, you'll see, like, a lot of people get the immediate reaction of, well, here's what I want, but that's impossible. Like, there's no way I can be able to do that. There's no way that little me can achieve all of these things. There's a lot of people give themselves reasons why they can't be doing something. I would urge you to do the opposite. Find reasons why you can, why you are in the unique position to accomplish whatever it is that you wrote that you wanted to your life to be. And then you'd be surprised to seeing how much of that is true. A lot, like, the biggest obstacle when people are doing these exercises is the fear that it's too unusual, that it's too out there, that people would judge you, that it's impossible, that you're not good enough. Getting rid of all these things and showing you that it's possible is kind of the job of a coach. but you absolutely can't do that. You can't do everything, but you can do anything, just not all at the same time. And if you give yourself some goals, make yourself a plan, divide the time you have available each year to commit to these goals, there's no reason you can't succeed.
Fantastic. I love that. Well, Yaroslav, how can people get in contact with you?
They can visit my website at lifeengineering.coach, or they can find me on Instagram and Facebook at lifeengineering.coach.
Okay, fantastic. We will include all of those in the show notes. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I love your passion, your inspiration, not only for the engineering field, but for those, as they transition, just kind of giving them that light and that spark to move forward with their lives, essentially. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Michelle, and allowing me to share the message. You're doing some great work. Thank you.